I am a transgender woman. I deserve equal treatment and respect like other types of women.
It's important for me to do it for my people, whether it be women, black people, transgender people, LGBTQ plus people, anybody who's scrutinized and oppressed.
I know so many times, whether you are gay or bisexual, and especially trans, you feel so alone. I just want them to know you are not alone.
Thank you for joining ESPN The Undefeated for our Black History Always Pride Month panel, The Triumphs and Struggles of LGBTQ plus athletes. The LGBTQ plus community is vast and diverse and has made slow but visible progress in the march toward full equality and fair treatment and representation in every strata of society. And yet, in the sports world, LGBTQ plus athletes often struggle to be heard and recognized and for their identities to be honored. We are hoping today's panel will speak to some of these stories. We are excited to be joined today by retired MMA fighter Fallon Fox, who was the first openly trans woman in her sport when she came out in 2013. Cece Telfer, who qualified for the Tokyo Olympic trials and became the first openly trans woman to win an NCAA 400-meter hurdles title in 2019. And Ryan Russell, a free agent NFL defensive end who came out as bisexual in 2019. Thank you all so much for joining me. And happy
Thank
Pride
you.
Month.
Happy Pride,
Happy
and thank you for
Pride.
having
Pride.
us.
Happy Pride.
Beautiful people.
I love it.
Oh, all of you, I wanted to start out by hearing from each of you about the general reception that greets athletes who come out as LGBTQ plus at whatever levels. Are there some themes or reactions that feel universal, or is there other sorts of ways that the reaction differs by the sport, by identity, or in your observation by race? Let's start with you, Fallon.
I feel like the reactions for people who come out as LGBTQ vary depending on where you fall on the spectrum. For instance, when athletes such as like Megan Rapinoe or Carl Nassib come out as lesbian or gay, there's a lot more support than when someone who comes out as trans, such as me or Cece. When I came out, I was actually forced out, which sucked. But when I did, there was an avalanche of negativity. I think it has to do with the fact that people don't know about transgender people as much as they do the rest of the spectrum. Plus, they don't know about what happens medically to a transgender person when they transition in relation to sports.
It differentiates too as well, as opposed to a trans woman being, they get the most hate, the most hate from society and bashing from society, as opposed to a trans man who's like, oh, they know their past, so they're like, wow, this person's very strong to be competing with cis men, quote unquote, and not being, they don't see us as real men and real women.
Ryan, what have you found? Because recently, of course, it's been all in the news. Carl Nassib posted his social media video coming out as gay, and much was made of the fact that he was the first active NFL player coming out, and it was heralded as almost a casual moment. Sports is catching up with the world. But I was very struck that there were the lesser told stories of, Michael Sam or, Jason Collins, John Amici, and of course your own story, Ryan. Tell us about your coming out as a bisexual football player, coming out as bisexual, and what you think about the reaction to Nassib has gotten, and how that maybe is different from the reaction that you were facing.
Yeah, definitely. I think in my own coming out story, I was so prepared kind of for homophobia, especially in male sports. So I would say kind of not obviously the same as being a trans athlete, but gender definitely also plays a role in coming out even as a cisgendered person. So in our society today, for some reason, we expect WNBA players to come out as lesbian or female professional athletes to come out as part of the community. But when a male professional athlete does, it's just different. Like I said, in no way to the same level as trans athletes, but there is still a gender difference. Also, when you talk about color and race, I was so prepared for homophobia, especially being in the NFL, that when my sexuality opened up kind of also a heap of racism, I was super confused. I was very confused also from people in the community as well. You know, even to add another layer onto it, I was in an I am in an interracial relationship, the same relationship at that time. And that then became a part of the attack in the onslaught. And it's a layered experience for all queer athletes, but also especially for queer athletes and LGBTQ plus athletes of color. And, you know, you see like a Carl Nassib come out now, and I would hope that the times are becoming more accepting. I would hope that it's the progress and the groundwork of Michael Sam, of Jason Collins, of myself, that makes this seem almost more accepted or praised even. But it's hard to not think about, you know, the fact that this is a white man, you know, generally pretty good looking guy, coming out and be accepted, kind of like a Colton Underwood, you know, not necessarily as active as an athlete, but still had an athletic background and being a white, good looking guy. And, you know, you see the Instagram followers shoot up. You see all of the organizations coming out to accept them, and, you know, brands now coming, all these things. And it's like, you know, that's interesting, because I've seen a very similar story to this, and the reception was not the same. But I hope it's progress. I want to be optimistic. That's just how I was raised and how I choose to be. But it brings a question of, you know, how are Black LGBTQ plus athletes valued in this society? And also, how are they measured? How are they seen, you know, and how are they attacked in a lot of ways? And what are people, the organizations that we commit our lives to, how are they protecting us?
So trans women face their own hurdles in sports, Cece, no pun intended, but they are often accused of having a physical advantage that's not fair, or it's not safe for cisgender women. But we also know violence against trans women, especially Black trans women, is widely documented, and it's deadly. So apart from the specter of physical violence, there's also all this vitriol that's directed personally at trans women, which I know you've also both experienced, and you, Fallon, were just talking about. Tell me, if you would, ladies, what it's been like for you to be a pioneer as the first trans woman in your sport, and what kinds of myths, misconceptions you have to battle, and have you been afraid?
Yes. Fallon, I can take this one first if that's okay. All right.
Go ahead.
So we also have to remember that, like, back in the days, and we got to recognize history, that Black people were, as a whole, in sports, seen as unfair. Our muscle mass, the fact that we're quote unquote stronger, we have our bone structure and all that stuff is contributing to our success as athletes. And the reality of it is that we just, giving our history, we have to work for what we want 100 times harder than the average person that has it handed to them. So I feel like that's where the work ethic comes from. And when we commit to something, we go hard and full out. We don't expect it. We have to work for it, as opposed to other individuals who, gain that resources or whatever they need to be successful. So moving on from that, trans women, and Black trans women particularly, are scrutinized and hated against because of the fact that, they were born a certain gender and they're transitioning to female, that quote unquote advantage is following their transition. That is not true. Overall, the point is, where the advantage comes from is resources. Your coach, your facility, and the people backing you. That's where the resources come from. And how hard you work for an athlete for what you want. So with all of that added into the factor, you're going to be a successful athlete regardless. You're going to come out on top, and you're going to thrive, and you're going to show up, and you're going to succeed. So that's what people need to understand, that it's not where you're coming from, it's where you're going and what you do to get there. And I feel like with the quote unquote advantages that people are talking about, that's where the medication and the science come into play. And this is where you have to do your research and really buckle down And you have those people with egocentric mentalities or the ideologies that like no matter what the facts are presented, they will never change their decision because they know what they know. So
or simply
that's where
don't,
we stand, or that's where I
don't
stand.
know what they don't know, right? And haven't done the research.
They don't know what they know.
Don't understand. And
Exactly.
Fallon, you've spoken to that very directly and had very direct experiences where you've said, people are not understanding this process. Can you talk about that? Where they're not understanding the process, and you've had some of what we were talking about.
Right. Yeah. So like I've had a lot of people come at me, on the medical side of things, saying that like, transgender athletes have like ridiculous unfair advantages. Like they talk about things like bone density, and they talk about like muscle strength, and like they say that you can carry more oxygen to your cells or something like that, which is all like untrue. Like bone density decreases, and musculature decreases, and your hemoglobin
Muscle
changes. What's
mass.
muscle mass and your hemoglobin changes, which helps that oxygen flow and all that. Transgender people get a bad rap for being trans as women of color, and so do cisgender women. They get a bad rap as being women of color. you know I remember back in the day, Don Imus was saying things like, that cisgender women on the basketball team or something like that, were mannish. So, I think that's still pervasive in, the consciousness of a lot of people. So I think this definitely carries over to transgender women of color. I think that if I didn't happen to be Black, I would have still faced bigotry because I was trans in sports, but being Black just added another layer to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to go into with the next question. I think Cece was talking about it. To make it to an elite level in any sport requires so much training and focus. But for each of you, you also have to, in addition to all that's required of your sport and your athleticism, navigate all these issues and perceptions around race and gender and sexual identity and the intersection of all of that. How are you able to juggle these multiple demands that come with trying to be true to yourself as an athlete, but also as a person, as a human being, right? And be elite in your sport. Ryan?
Yeah, it's almost impossible. I remember being in the NFL the year that Colin Kaepernick was taking a stand for social injustice and against police brutality, and him taking a knee. And that was so divisive amongst locker rooms, amongst leagues and teams. And I remember, being a closeted athlete at that time, like, wow, if we can't even agree that Black Lives Matter throughout the NFL, how can we agree that LGBTQ plus lives matter? That inclusion in these locker rooms matter, that this sport is about all of us equally and not just about the few. And it's not, keep politics out of football and all these things that you hear. And it's like, yeah, I would love that. I would love to keep politics out of football. I would love to keep race and sexual, but I can't, because as soon as I leave this locker room and as soon as I take this helmet off and I take these shoulder pads off, I am under attack. My life then becomes so much lesser than my, counterparts.
It's like you first, keep politics out of it, right?
Exactly. It's like it's really the shut up and dribble mentality. Like, shut up and play. I don't care, that your life is threatened on a daily. Just come to work and make these plays. So it, and that was just a few years ago, and it felt impossible then. Now, you see players taking a stand, led, of course, by women and our female athletes, especially in the WNBA, who have been doing the work outside of the court as well for many years now. And you see more athletes trying to take that on and use their voice and use their platform. So I believe it's getting easier to navigate the intersections between race and sexuality and sport. But it's forever difficult. It takes all of us. Like, it really does. The players, the fan base, the ownership, it really takes everyone involved.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add to that, Ryan, like you said, everything very yes, on point. Also, when it comes to the gender differentiation, remember the respect that comes with it. Yes, he's gay, but he is winning for the Patriots. Like, the Patriots are bombing. Like, so what? He's gay, but at the end of the day, like, we're number one, right? Second of all, the resources are not the same for the sexes, regardless of cis or
Oh
trans.
no.
Women and well, like male pro players and female pro players do not have the same resources. Male have way more. They get way more money. They get the top notch of everything, and the girls are left to nothing. So why does it come to when that women like me are getting like we're playing the sport? You know, it's supposed to be inclusive, a very inclusive environment, right? A very accepting, welcoming, safe space. Why is it that women like me, when we decide to like, you know, live our authentic lives and like, you know, play our sport that we love, and we're being supported by our female athletes and our teammates, right? Why is it that when we're being supported by them, that they don't see that, like, at the end of the day, like, we have nothing, and we're trying to, you know, make this place at the end of the, a safe space, and we already have nothing, and men have everything. Now they want to interject and be like, no, that's fair, women's sports is at risk, But you have to remember that as Black women in general, if we're too good, we're too fast, we're too whatever, it's gonna be questioned. Wait a minute. Is she really like cisgender? Like, she's too good. Like, she just broke like a world record, or like she's way too close to that like male world. Well, whatever we do as, you know, Black women, Black female athletes, or women in general, period, it's gonna be criticized, it's gonna be questioned, and people are gonna be like, you know, they're never gonna be happy.
Because it's a similar ideology, like the same ideology that is, in my case, behind homophobia is sexism and misogyny. It's the same thing. It's this feeling that the feminine and masculine personalities and beings and genders should stay so separate, and there is a ranking order here. So it's women, of course, bear the brunt of that, especially women in the community, because now it's like two marks. It's like two things. Either you're cisgendered and then your sexuality or gender is being questioned, or you are a trans woman and then you get the brunt of all of the attacks, even from your own community, which is the most horrific part of this whole thing, in my opinion.
It's the hierarchy of these marginalized identities, right? And I was saying that about Fallon and Cece, so I'm so glad you brought up the gender, Fallon. Can you add to that? Because the discrepancies already, cisgender, trans women, you know, exist. They're baked into the cake, and so then you're just layering on top of that.
Yeah, it's just a lot of compounding things that add up. You know, like, you know, gender, like sexuality, like all, you know, race. You know, all of these things like just compound upon each other. Like, and I find it hard to like juggle all those things all at the same time. You know, it's really, really, really rough. Like, I remember I was advised by someone not to talk about transgenders issues and not to fight back and just to play the sport. But like, how can you do that though? How could I do that without like, you know, talking about it? You know, it was like my career was at risk, you know, and everything like that, you know. So it's just very, very hard to juggle all these things, the attacks that come against you.
Talk about that a little bit. How do you what is your coping mechanism? Do you
My
like
coping mechanism?
People out? Do you, you know, do you go to a different place in your mind? You know, as athletes, you already have to have tremendous focus, but what are some of the tools you've been able to use for anybody?
It's really rough for me because, like, you know, especially on social media, because like people come at you and like they say not to read the comments and not to read, but like especially if you have a page, you know, to maintain that and try and like, you know, but lately I've just been blocking people and just like, you know, staying away from them, just block and like we're done, and just not,
and especially when they tag you
really,
and stuff, it's so hard not to see it.
Yeah.
So for you, Cece, you use some of those same techniques, you block, or, you know.
Sorry, Fallon, not to cut you off, but yeah, like, it's so hard not to see the hate and the discrimination, especially when they tag you into these hateful things. And then on top of that, when I get to competitions, yes, the main focus is to focus on what you're there for, to execute what you've been working so hard for, blood, sweat, and tears. And I can validate to that, blood, sweat, and tears at practice. So how I like tune out everything is that I use my teammates. So my teammates would help me, whatever they see. If they see something, they say something. They'll put their friends in check. They'll put other people in check. Thank you so much. Thank God for teammates. My coaches will also do the same. And then, yeah, sometimes when I hear those negative comments and I see people go out of their way to do, you know, negative things or hateful things at a track meet while I'm about to warm up or get on that line, I have to remember, I have to take that into consideration and be like, you know what, you're just fueling the fire, and this is just gonna make this run even better, easier for me, you know. So that's what I think. But yeah, it does get to me a little bit, and I have to remember that, like, Cece, you've been working so hard for this. I'm not. Don't. You need to focus and you need to execute what you've been working so hard for. So that's where I'm coming from.
I try and concentrate more on like the big names, big people who are like coming at me, like, you know, I don't know, the Dana Whites and the Joe Rogans of the world. You know, like, I don't know if you guys remember Joe Rogan, what he said, but his comments
And the
back in 2000,
Martinez.
Oh,
and the
yeah.
Martinez, yeah, his comments back in 2013 were scientifically wrong, uneducated, and ignorant, which was dangerous for a
Well, Fallon,
person that has his platform, you know.
you've also had people apologize to you, though, Fallon. Talk about that as well, because after they realized that they were just misinformed, then, you know, you started getting a little bit different reception. They got some attention. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, a few athletes like lately have been like apologize. Rosie Sexton apologized lately. She's a professional MMA fighter, you know, and like she kind of came at me, you know, online with some negative stuff that, you know, could be considered transphobic, like back in the day. But it's been 8 years, and I think like people like her, some people have like progressed, and she progressed, and she looked into the issue, like, you know, thoroughly over 8 years, and she changed her mind. So that's really positive. Her and like Julie Kedzie came out and said that she supported me. So yeah, and I think some minds are changing on the front with the transgender athletes. It's taking some time, but we're getting there.
And people hopefully are evolving as we're all of as society is evolving. Although society is, you know, pulling sports, you know, kicking and screaming in some ways. Ryan, you're part of the Undefeated documentary coming out soon called Finding Free. And in that, I've seen some excerpts, and you speak in such affecting ways. And you mentioned the idea of having to sacrifice to come out. I'm going to play you that clip and then tell us what you meant by that.
Literally, as soon as things were going great away from football, I got the call. We need you here tonight so you can try out tomorrow so we can get this thing going. And I'm telling this new life that I made that, okay, not am I gonna I'm gonna have to put you on pause, but I'm gonna have to like get rid of you. Like, you gotta go. Like, and I'm looking myself in the mirror and I'm like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna give football up to be happy? Or are you gonna give happiness up to be a football player? And at that moment, I was like, no, I'm not sacrificing anything. I've sacrificed so much in my life. And in the end of the day, the only thing I was really sacrificing was my own happiness, and I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I think especially being a Black man that grew up in conservative Republican Texas, you know, my color as my sexuality is something that I was born with, but the color is the first thing that they see. And you realize as a young boy that, you know, there's a decision to be made about your skin color. You can hate it. You can, you know, try to wish it away. You can try to be someone else, but it's not going anywhere. It's not changing. And then it leads you to the other choice, to embrace it, to, you know, live as yourself fully and to love yourself. And that will also allow other people who look like you and love like you to do the same. So when it comes to sexuality, I had to start framing that the same way. I was like, this isn't changing. This isn't going anywhere. This is who I am. This is who I was born to be. And I can either accept that and start being happy and living my life, or I can, you know, be miserable. And my sport will suffer, and my family will suffer, and my relationships will suffer. And that wasn't anything I wanted. At the end of the day, you know, the only real decision, if I wanted to live a happy life, was to love myself. And that, at the end of the day, that's all anything is. That's all that Black power is. That's all that acceptance and coming out is. It's a form of self-love. And it's hard. It's definitely hard when everything in society is telling you no, especially when your job and how you feed yourself and something you've been dreaming of your whole life is telling you no as well. But the sport is going to change. I'm not. You know, the locker room is going to change. I'm not. People's opinions and what they're taught is going to change. I'm not. And that's that's the truth. And I hope that more athletes find that in themselves.
And a lot of that changes because you all are out here speaking your truth, right? And so for Cece and Fallon, for both of you all, do you also feel like, you know, you've made these hard sacrifices or different ones? And what were they? How did they feel for you?
When it comes to sacrifices, I've made a lot of them. So just me living my authentic life was a sacrifice. It was a decision between, living my authentic self or not. So, or not, as in like not living. So when it comes to that, coming out was a sacrifice because then I lost my family. I'm shunned. They don't want to have anything to do with me. You know, I have a Jamaican background, and Jamaicans are very heteronormative. They don't do gay men. And if that's the case, they want you to hide it, suppress it, fake it. And trans women are definitely just no. It's a big no. So with that being said, all the sacrifices that I have had to make for my sport is I'm competing by myself. I don't really have a team. I don't have teammates. So now that I'm an individual going to these meets by myself, I have my safety to worry about. So I'm my own security. I'm my own teammate. I'm my own coach. Going into these track meets alone, like I'm vulnerable, So that's another sacrifice that I'm giving up, is my safety. And then would that be like, I don't have I don't have a team to help me, in training. So like if I get injured, that's the end of my career, right? So I have to take it easy at practice. I don't go as hard because I can't. I'm scared. Like if I go too hard and I get injured, like that's it, right? So those are the sacrifices that I've had to make. And not having that family support is huge. Once you have that family support, you have that mental support. No, nothing else matters to you at this point. Like, your family is number one, and then you have your coach's support, your teammates support. And, I feel like that's when it comes like that. Again, that's when the sex is coming into play. I feel like more male athletes coming out as gay, but as gay, have more support because, they're seen as like that. That you're strong for coming out, and like, I see that and I recognize that, as opposed to a trans woman, Black trans woman. It's like, wait, like, my family wanted me to fake it. Like, no, like, why did you have to give into that lifestyle? I'm like, it's not a decision, it's the decision of being alive or not. So, and I'm going to do this for me.
I feel like, I was forced to come out, so I lost my ability to be stealth in sports, which is, I mean, maybe I planned on coming out at some time someday, but I wanted to make it a lot further. And, I lost my ability for many people to see me as a woman because of, all the negativity that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a sacrifice a little bit to my mental health. It's rough to take in, and it can cause depression, and anxiety and stuff like that. Yeah, those are the major things that I lost, I think. And yeah.
With each of you all, I'm really seeing the differences, like we talked about at the beginning, by gender, by sport, by, even where you are in your careers. I know for each of you, it's also really, really important to work with trans youth. So I'm wondering, what do you want them to take from your collective, but your individual examples as well, for this Pride Month, for Pride Months to come, and for LGBTQ plus communities in the future, in general? What do you have to impart to them that you have learned in going through everything that you all have gone through?
Wow. I want them to get courage and to never back down. Like, trans kids are under attack right now. As you mentioned, over 30 states have tried to enact or have enacted legislation to banning transgender kids from sports,
Right.
which is ridiculous. And it's almost as if the opposition feels that these trans kids are easy targets because they feel that they can't defend themselves, which is really just heinous. They're attacking kids, for crying out loud. So I mean, I hope that I pass on resilience. I hope that I pass on courage, and I hope that they listen and do that. We aren't going away. Trans kids aren't away. Trans adults aren't going away in sports. So I mean, I think that needs to happen. So.
Cece, how about you?
So this is very personal. This is a very personal topic for me. And this is the one thing that I really did not want to happen was society targeting trans kids and kids who are unique and kids who are, unique in every way, LGBTQ, non-binary. Like, this is the one thing that I did not want, and it's happening. So the one thing that I want to say to them, especially, during Pride Month, is the best thing that you can do is embrace yourself and live your authentic self, because it's a breath of fresh air you can finally breathe. It's like a weight lift off your shoulders. And at the end of the day, no matter what anybody says, my biggest thing was my family knowing who I was and like my knowing the true me. That killed me. And faking it is oh my God, it takes so much effort. It takes so much out of you, like going home every day and crying, like. And then once you start to embrace yourself, nothing else matters. Like, I don't have my family. Like, I gave up my house. I was living in you know what I mean? Like, I was living in my car. Like, to be true to myself, to be authentic, it feels so freeing. Like, at the end of the day, my family knows I don't care about anybody else. I'm so sorry. Yes, the words hurt. Yes, the hate hurts. But I'm me. I'm living my true life. At the end of the day, I'm still wearing that miniskirt and those heels down the road.
Yes.
I'm still like living my best life. I still look good. I still feel good. I'm still going to run fast, and I'm still going to win because I love what I do and I am me, So that's the message that I'm sending is to, it's going to be hard, but once you finally commit to living and embracing yourself, it's going to be a smooth sailing from there.
And turning away from all these things that sound like they just numbed your souls, right?
Absolutely.
And so Ryan, I'll leave that question with you as well, with trans youth, with youth struggling with their sexual identity. What words would you have to impart based on your struggle?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's that the world is going to change. You don't have to, and you shouldn't have to. And we're going to change it. And you live in your authentic life and being happy and being joyous and joining teams and playing sports, that's all going to change it. When people attack our community, the Black community, the trans community, the LGBTQ plus community, there are people here to defend you. I know so many times, whether you are gay or bisexual, and especially trans, you feel so alone. I just want them to know you are not alone. Like, you will never be alone again. And we are here to change the world for you. Kids shouldn't have to change the world. We're going to change it for you.
Oh, I love that. And the words that came to mind, and not just because you're a football player, but like there are people out here blocking and tackling for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, we putting in the groundwork.
Yes.
and fighting and running and
Absolutely.
jumping and doing all of that with excellence. So I want to thank each of you. I so appreciate and am delighted to have been able to speak with you and get your very valuable insights about your experiences. And I know they will help other people who are watching. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yay, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank
Yay.
you.
My whole life was centered around football. My love, my happiness, my pride, it all went to the game. Football is a game of wills, the game of toughness. Football is a game of adversity, and that's on the field and off the field. You can't ask me to be all this on the field and not accept that off the field.
Keeping a part of yourself secret from the world. What was that like?
I just felt like, oh, it's another target on my son's back, and I was terrified.
Ryan Russell is living a beautiful, fulfilling, and loving life.
He has really transformed into a person that not only makes such an impact on others, on my life and the people around him,
If I can be free as who I am, then I can be revolutionary.